I could get used to this live stuff, my man. Forget the live to tape. See, I'm less inclined to cuss when we're doing this thing live. Monday, January 22nd, 2024. It's episode 461 of the Anik and Florian podcast, live on the DraftKings YouTube channel, after the fact on the DraftKings Network, clips, as always, on the Anik and Florian podcast network and channel. Kenny Florian live in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's gated, though. You're not getting access to him. Good morning, my man. How we doing?
I got to keep myself protected, insulated, if you will, at all times, John. Just like the guys that fight in the cage. Man, what a weekend, man. A lot to talk about. Can't wait to do it, man. Do you have a good trip back?
It was okay. You know, it was a long one, as many of our fans can attest. We didn't get back to the hotel room till 2:50 a.m. Eastern time and had to be in the lobby at 3:30 a.m. to get picked up. And by the way, Kenny's house would truly be one of the worst possible destinations if you were trying to get something accomplished for so many reasons, right? I mean, he could drag you into his padded jiu-jitsu room if he really wanted to make it hard for you. But there are other things that would be a lot more expeditious. But thank you all for joining us live for our UFC 297 recap today. We will talk to famed mixed martial arts coach Mark Henry in about 30 minutes. On Frankie Edgar's Hall of Fame induction. Congratulations to F.E. Frankie Edgar. We do have a special guest scheduled in about an hour, so hopefully he will join us. And just given everything that's going on with the scoring of this fight, we talked to the number one source, Sean Sheehan from Severe MMA, coming up in about 75 minutes. But we are all yours for the next 90 minutes at the very least. Ray Longo will join us. A lot of different things to get into at UFC 297. And Ken Flo, we will jump off right there. There is a new UFC middleweight champion, and that has been the norm, right? This belt has changed hands a lot. South Africa's Dricus du Plessis. He gets it done by split decision over Sean Strickland. 48-47 times 2. Sal D'Amato, the dissenting judge, 48-47 for Strickland. Ken Flo, we got a new champion, and he's a very deserving guy. Nice to see Dricus get it done, and they're certainly celebrating this man in more places than South Africa here on a Monday morning.
No question about it. Well, listen, both fighters were fantastic. Both fought a great fight. And I think that, you know, for me, when I was breaking it down, both fighters have a tendency of trying to lead the dance. And both fighters are at their best when they are pressing forward, when they are pressing the action, when they are backing up their opponents. That's what it kind of allows them to create the offense that they're able to do on fight night. It's not that they're bad necessarily going backwards, but their games tend to flourish when they are moving forward. So for me, it was the guy that was moving forward that was going to win this fight. Not always a perfect indicator, as are the significant strikes for that matter, but they do tell a certain narrative. They weave a certain story throughout the fight that lends itself for judges to kind of come up with some kind of a winner. And for me, it could have gone either way. Some of those rounds were really close, but then you could also make an argument that maybe even 4 rounds could have been for Dricus. Maybe 3 rounds for Strickland, maybe 4 rounds. It was really close, a few of those rounds. And, you know, if you're just looking at stats, or if you're just looking at who's moving forward, if you're just looking at blood and things like that, you know, those aren't always the great indicators. You have to factor in all of those things and then come up with a decision. And because of that, we had a close one. We had a split decision for Dricus. I have no problem with that. Probably wouldn't have had a problem if Sean was the winner in this one. So yes, I did get it right, but I'm not out there, you know, trying to brag to people, because it certainly could have gone the other way. And it was just a wild night of fights in general when it came to decisions. But you know, I'll pause there and let you jump in there, John.
Well, if you were someone who had a betting ticket on Dricus du Plessis and someone who got it at plus money, congratulations, because it did close essentially a pick, a minus 110 on both sides, right? But no, I was having a little fun at the expense of people who are saying, you know, I fucking told you so, right? Dricus du Plessis. It's like, well, it was a really close fight. It could have gone either way. There were a lot of different layers to this fight. There were a lot of sharp minds who scored it both ways. Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson scored the fight for Dricus du Plessis. So Jon Anik's scorecard certainly doesn't matter as much as Demetrius's does or Kenny Florian's does. I did think Dricus du Plessis won the fight. I had him winning rounds 2, 3, and 4. when it comes to the takedowns as one angle of this, right? Dricus du Plessis, 6 of 11 taking Sean Strickland down. Nobody else had really realized success taking Sean Strickland down in the 185-pound division prior to Dricus du Plessis. Now, he didn't do a ton with these takedowns, north of 2 minutes of control time, but as Luke Thomas articulated on Instagram and others have said, for me and for Luke and for Demetrius, it was the overall impact of everything that Dricus was doing. He was backing Sean Strickland up. Yeah, he was eating jabs for lunch. Yes, a lot of those did a lot of damage, and those were significant strikes. But it was the overall impact for me of what Dricus du Plessis was doing offensively that won him this fight in those key middle rounds.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the way I saw it. And when we were breaking this fight down last week, I said that, Dricus has the ability to do a lot of damage in a short amount of time. Now, Strickland certainly did his fair share of damage in this fight as well with that jab, as you mentioned. But I don't think it was enough. He's not known as that guy that's going to hurt you with one shot. It's the accumulation of blows that makes Sean Strickland such a problem. It's also his unorthodox approach and his forward pressure that eventually grinds you down. Dricus wasn't having it in this fight. He was able to turn the tables many times throughout this fight and be the predator. He was able to back up Sean Strickland in this fight and take away a lot of his offense because of it. He stayed busy with kicks. It was his kicks in particular where I think he was finding a lot of success. I also think when he was landing the power shots, he was landing the heavier blows, especially a little bit later in the fight.
Yeah.
And those takedowns mixed in with all of that offense was able to tell a story that he was a little bit more successful when it came to effectiveness of striking and effectiveness of grappling.
And in terms of big shots, Sean Strickland, I think, could use more of those. And part of the reason why Sean Strickland has been involved in a lot of close fights, 3 recent split decisions dating to February of 2022 against Jack Hermanson, Jared Cannonier, and now Dricus du Plessis, is because maybe while his jab is fantastic and not seen all that often in mixed martial arts, that was a huge part of what he got done here. And there was just a lot of diversification to what Dricus du Plessis did. Numbers really don't matter with respect. In terms of the numbers, yes, Sean Strickland landed 173 significant strikes to Dricus du Plessis' 137. Headshots, 157 of 387 for Strickland, 81 of 283 for Dricus du Plessis. But herein lies the rub for a lot of people as we go to some of the other columns, right? 6 of 11 for takedowns for Dricus du Plessis, 32 of 37 on his body strikes compared to 10 of 15 to Sean Strickland. Strickland 6 of 6 on the lower leg attacks, or the leg attacks, I guess I should say. Du Plessis 24 of 34. So Dricus du Plessis was a very busy man in the middle of this fight, and Sean certainly acknowledged some adversity when it came to what he believes was a clash of heads. I still haven't had the chance to watch this fight back. I thought it was a clean strike on the broadcast. Obviously, I don't get the benefit of the doubt in real time. But Kenny, I just thought overall, given what Dricus du Plessis did, there's an argument to score the fight for him. 61% of the listeners that I polled, scored this fight for Sean Strickland, but I'm happy for the new champion.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think that you're accurate with what you're talking about in regards to the middle of the fight really belonging to someone like Dricus du Plessis. And that's the way I scored it. I had rounds 2, 3, and 4 for Dricus. I think that rounds 1 and 5 were probably for Sean Strickland. 1, certainly. 5 was even close, in my opinion, because I thought the power shots that were landing for Dricus were a little bit more effective, but Sean definitely was throwing way more volume in round 5, which is why I leaned towards Sean in that one. Yeah, I think that Sean kind of let it slip out of his hands a little bit. I saw an interesting comment, and apologies for not seeing it online. I don't remember who really said it, but they were talking about also Chris Curtis in regards to Sean Strickland and how because they spar so much, at some points during the actual fight, they get caught into some sparring-like rounds or sparring-like exchanges. I think that's more of a case for Chris Curtis than it is for Sean Strickland, because Strickland's out there to fight. But there were some modes where he was kind of taking his time a little bit too much. And if you do that against someone like a Dricus du Plessis, they will take over. They will start to back you up and land heavier shots. Dricus is a massive 185 pounder. He's extremely powerful, more powerful, I think, than Sean Strickland. And I think that really was the difference here. It really was able to kind of stop Sean Strickland from just advancing forward with that jab. The kicks were able to nullify that jab a little bit for a while. I think rounds 2, 3, and 4, the kicks really were the story for me, as were the takedowns. And even though Sean was able to thwart off some of those takedown attempts, was able to get back to his feet, he's still expending energy and is carrying the weight of Dricus du Plessis, which will take effect on the amount of potency that you have in your strikes, will take your conditioning away a little bit, and also kind of take its toll on you mentally. Even someone as tough as Sean Strickland, mentally, physically, spiritually, can succumb to that level of pressure and carrying the weight of an opponent like a Dricus du Plessis. And we were talking about significant strikes. I have some things printed out here. Not all significant strikes are created equal, right? I say that all the time, and it's very true. And I think that was the case here. But I thought Strickland started out really well with front kicks and jabs. I thought that was the tone of round 1, which he won. And then Dricus with those takedowns, landing the bigger shots, those blitzing attacks, that forward pressure started to take its toll on Sean. And you could hear in round 3, Sean's corner saying, "Hey, we didn't like that round. You got to get back into the picture here."
Round 2 really is the one that I want to watch back, but we're going to keep it on the martial arts here for a while. But I did think, that was pretty telling when Nixick was like, I didn't like that round. And I was sort of thinking, if I'm Strickland right after that round 3, that's not what we're looking for. I know the round was relatively close, but that was not what Sean Strickland was looking for. In terms of Dricus du Plessis' style, there have been a lot of professional fighters who have publicly or privately criticized him and said, oh, he's not very good. And, certainly there are things that maybe are undeniable. The footwork is awkward and unorthodox and maybe just a little bit sloppy. But Kenny, in terms of this fighter, he is an offensive force. He is an offensive fighter that prioritizes offense. He prioritizes finishes, right? Doesn't have a lot of decision wins. This was the first time he had realized a 4th round. And I think a lot of his style is something that is rooted in South African culture. And I might lose some people here, but Kenny, part of his martial arts style is rooted in just straight fucking desire and will. And I think in a championship setting, right, he really went for it on this night, even if he lost the final round. And I think that was a big part of it in those middle rounds. The guy really was trying to kill the opposition, so to speak. And I think that's why he's a world champion here 2 days later.
I think there's no question about that. I think there's a lot of different sports or settings where you could take a certain guy and you go, man, this guy is extremely powerful or he's extremely fast. And those things stand out and they end up kind of keeping them above everybody else in that weight class. That's not really the case for someone like Dricus du Plessis. It's not even the case for someone like Sean Strickland. Both of these fighters are strong and are good because of the sum of all of their parts put together. Right. And as you mentioned, you talk about someone like a Dricus du Plessis, who is also extremely durable and extremely tough. Right. He was dealing with that eye early on. He was able to battle back. He had some good defense with that shelling defense. And it may not look pretty. It's not what a coach or, some kind of online tutorial would tell you to do specifically from an execution standpoint. It might even look a little bit sloppy. But it doesn't matter because the way he's able to put it all together allows him to win rounds. And I would argue for people who are in the sport, for people who have trained in MMA or jiu-jitsu, the most difficult guy to deal with oftentimes is that guy who is not moving at a rhythm or a pace or in a way that you are used to. I would much prefer to go against, in many cases, someone who is highly technical, who I could read their patterns and movements really well, something that I'm used to, as opposed to someone who I have no idea what they're going to do next. And Dricus brings that. Again, not the prettiest thing, but it doesn't have to. Sometimes in combat, it doesn't have to be pretty. You just got to get it done.
And constantly switching stances, just creating different things to be looked at, and just a lot of offense coming almost immediately off of those stance switches. And Alexander Volkanovski, another guy who constantly keeps you off rhythm with stance switches, even if he is a little bit more technical. Now, in terms of a Sean Strickland matchup for Israel Adesanya versus a Dricus du Plessis matchup, I just want to sort of piggyback off of Dricus's style here. Not that we need to spin this forward in terms of the calendar or UFC 300 or anything else, but if you're Izzy, right? I mean, would you rather rematch Strickland or fight Dricus du Plessis?
If I'm Izzy, I would prefer to rematch Sean Strickland.
You think that's an easier fight with respect?
Yeah, I think it's an easier fight to manage. Now he didn't exactly do the best job in that first fight. I do not want to take away what Sean Strickland accomplished in that first fight against Israel Adesanya. It was unbelievable, deserved it. I would say he was extremely dominant against Israel Adesanya, one of the best, if not the best, middleweight of all time. But I think it's a way easier fight to predict and to manage against Sean Strickland than it is against Dricus du Plessis. He's awkward. He's not the cleanest striker. He's not even the cleanest grappler, but he's going to be in your face. And if he can adopt that same style of Sean Strickland, which is what he does, which means backing up your opponents, taking away their leg kicks, from there, it's a much more simplified fight for Dricus du Plessis than it is for Israel Adesanya, especially when we talk about the takedowns that he has to deal with. Israel Adesanya is a fantastic fighter. He's amazing. One of the best strikers that I've ever seen compete. But on the ground, there are vulnerabilities there. We have seen him susceptible being taken down, controlled, and beat up there. And I think with someone as powerful as Dricus du Plessis, who stays as busy as Dricus, that's where he can also bring the pain on that level as well.
We're not going to get an immediate rematch between Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis, even if it is a fight that I would love to see again. How would you handicap those two in a second setting? Do you feel like these guys would be 5-5 if they fought 10 times? Do you feel like somebody would have the upper hand? I know it's sort of a difficult question, but they clearly seemed pretty evenly matched, at least on this Saturday night.
Yeah, I've said this many times before. Some fighters are just kind of made for each other based on their styles. I think this is a clear example of that. They're both very similar in their approach and how they get things done. I think that if I'm looking at this fight, I think Sean Strickland could probably learn a little bit more from this fight than maybe DDP. Yep. So because of that, I think we'll always see a kind of a close fight. But I would not count Sean Strickland out of that equation of maybe even winning more than Dricus. But it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you fight someone and you never ever see them again, no matter how close you guys are in rankings and things like that. This sport is just nuts. Okay, you get one shot at it. That's what you have to make as far as an assumption in this sport if you are a fighter. And you got to do the best of what you have. And I certainly see them kind of going back and forth, but I do think Sean could have made more adjustments off that first performance than maybe DDP.
I chronicled a little bit on the broadcast the extent to which Sean Strickland has repeatedly stepped up for this promotion, right? Dating really to the Alex Pereira fight when he put his number 4 ranking on the line against a man that nobody wanted to face. Pay-per-view debut for Sean Strickland. And of course, it didn't last very long against Alex Pereira. Fast forward 6 months, January 2023, Kelvin Gastelum can't fight Nassourdini Mavov. Who steps into the main event? Sean Strickland, right? So when he got the championship fight against Israel Adesanya, I know Dricus du Plessis said that fight shouldn't have happened. I vehemently disagree. Sean Strickland really deserved that opportunity, won the world title, and then a few months later here, they needed somebody to headline in Toronto, maybe hoping that they could turn around at UFC 300. And who stepped up again, Kenny? Sean Strickland, right? So I think the guy deserves a lot of credit. And the good news is his bank account is now fatter than ours, you know? And let's see what Cody's pulling up here. All right, some odds. Jesus, you scared me. I thought we had a fucking special guest. I lost my train of thought, you know, but Sean Strickland deserves a lot of credit for what he has done, even if he's not going to get an immediate opportunity to fight for his title again. I thought he was a worthy champion. He has become an MMA superstar. There were actually comparisons to Conor McGregor, believe it or not, right? Just given how exponentially this man's following has grown really since the Adesanya fight in September, but I actually think it dates to the Alex Pereira fight in July of 2022. So before we spin things forward for both of these athletes, what do you have for us on what was largely a very productive week and 5 month stretch for the superstar Sean Strickland?
No question about it. And this is why I picked him as personality of the year in 2023. People think it was like, oh, he's got this lovely personality with all this glowing charisma, and that's why I'm picking him. No, he's just authentic, for better or worse. It doesn't mean, you or me want to hang out with Sean Strickland 24/7 or whatever, that we agree with everything he says. But, I think there is this kind of magic that happens around athletes, people that are out in the limelight, that are bringing a certain level of authenticity. And I think Sean has definitely done that. He doesn't give a shit about what you think. He's going to tell you what he thinks, though, for better or worse, and he's going to fight his ass off. And people appreciate that, man. When you give 110% of what you think, of what you want to do, of what you enjoy in this world, and you actually, prove it, beyond words, that says something. Sean Strickland is that dude. And I think that whether he won or lost here, I think he won. Not only did he change his life yet again with this performance and with this huge fight that brought a lot of eyes, but I think that a lot of people would love to see him fight for the belt again. And I think his next fight, which may or may not be for a title, depending on what happens, will be another huge fight. That's a guy that the UFC can rely on. What the UFC promotion wants, what every MMA promotion wants, an organization, they want a fighter, okay, that people want to follow, that people want to see compete. Doesn't matter. Champion, not champion, doesn't matter. You can have an extremely successful career if you are a guy that people want to see fight. Sean Strickland, already being a champion, has accomplished a lot, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him fight for the belt in the near future again.
I just would like to see him out of the UFC Apex. I don't know that we need him in main events at the Apex anymore. I would love to see him co-main event on pay-per-view. He certainly has a great 5-round style, but I really think you hit on the rub. There's a lot to be gained in this fight for Sean Strickland, despite the loss, and I do think that just a little bit more commitment to fight-ending consequential blows could be one of the things that you see from Sean Strickland his next time around, to try to leave the judges out of the equation. Because even though it's tired to say don't leave it in the judges' hands, there is tremendous risk, obviously, when you are not able to put the opposition away. All right, we will spin things forward for Dricus du Plessis in about 60 seconds. But DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL playoffs, is bringing you an offer that'll help make the playoffs electrifying. New customers can bet $5 on any game and get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Championship games are now set, and the road to Las Vegas goes through Baltimore and San Francisco. Ravens favored by 3 right now over the Chiefs. 49ers 6.5-point home favorites over the Detroit Lions. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code AFPOD. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code AFPOD. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.com/football for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources. All right, UFC 300 is 11 weeks away. Dateline Las Vegas, T-Mobile Arena. Kenny, I can't say to you, I don't know what the financial ramifications are for a pay-per-view point accruing champion like Dricus du Plessis to fight April 13th at UFC 300 versus fighting at UFC 302 without as much support around him, right? I don't know if that's a $2 million swing. I truly don't know. I'm just going to say to you, UFC 300 is 11 weeks away. Du Plessis' right foot is in a boot. His face is shut. So certainly there would be something suboptimal about having that type of abbreviated training camp. But Du Plessis said it sounded amazing. So what do you think about all that?
John, I don't see a problem. He's got another eye. He's got another leg. Okay. Yeah, so he's perfectly fine in my book. No, I guess it depends on the severity. I think the eye is going to be fine. Certainly. I'm not sure what's going on with the foot. That could certainly be a broken metatarsal or something, or foot itself, or just could be nothing, just could be bruised. So I think, from a medical standpoint, we got to find out exactly what is going on. But 11 weeks, I think, is plenty of time for a person to get back in there. And not only is UFC 300 this epic event where you can make a lot of money on it because, it's this milestone for the UFC, but I mean, look at his opponent, Israel Adesanya. This is a guy who brings in a lot of pay-per-view buys. And Israel Adesanya, I think it seems like, is also intrigued with this opportunity as well, right? I mean, here's a guy, he said he wanted to be away from the cage for like at least 14 months or 2 years. I forget what he said. But now he's like, let me change my mind a little bit. I think he's seeing that, with this changing of the guard, he has this opportunity to come in here and regain his throne, then maybe go in there, get the rematch against Strickland. So I think all three of these guys can really benefit from this scenario in a lot of different ways based on who is available, who wants in, and even the aftermath of that fight. So really intriguing stuff here. But I think 11 months is certainly enough time, again, depending on the severity of the injuries of Dricus to Plessis, for him to get back in there and fight someone like Adesanya. Those opportunities, again, do not come around very often. And it could be quite the money grab for all parties involved.
If you're asking me for my prediction as to what headlines UFC 300 in 11 weeks, I think it will be Du Plessis versus Adesanya. And what a story for the South African to be the last man to make the walk at the historic UFC 300. Now, Alex Pereira seemingly has interest, and he could defend his belt against Magomed Ankalaev that night. I think you're going to see Alex Pereira. And you know what? Maybe the headliner is actually Pereira versus Ankalaev. I think that's probably the direction in which I would be leaning. I should not try to get too predictive here, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw both of those title fights at UFC 300. But who knows the extent to which Adesanya is even healthy and ready to get into what would be a full training camp right now in a couple of weeks or so. I do think for Dricus du Plessis to be in an active competition cycle, there could be a huge advantage there. So I do think you see du Plessis at UFC 300. I do think that Alex Pereira can make 185 pounds if he were to be afforded the opportunity, but I'm not sure that as a newly minted 205-pound champion, they're going to give him an opportunity to now drop back down to try to win the belt that he lost. I just don't see it playing out that way. But I do think that that Israel Adesanya versus Dricus du Plessis has a ton of legs for UFC 300, and the betting line is already out, and it's very close on paper. All right. I hesitate to bring up too many things as far as the scoring is concerned right now, because we are going to talk to Sean Sheehan later in the program. But let me at least talk about this. The whole notion that to be the champion, you have to decisively beat the champion, right? This is not boxing, even if that is an antiquated theme for that sport as well. But that sport has 12 rounds that are 3 minutes. And perhaps back in the day when there was a close round, that round would go to the champion. Certainly on the surface, Kenny, you cannot give a close round to the champion, Sean Strickland, just because he made the walk as the champion on that night. That is patently absurd. But I understand why many of our fans, more than you can imagine, I'm talking thousands upon thousands of fans, feel dissatisfied when a champion loses his title by close split decision. But it's one of the many inconvenient truths in mixed martial arts. I know Sean Sheehan and others don't like to hear me banging on the criteria or the fact that we don't have enough judges, but Alex Davis and others have suggested to me that there's so much that we can do to make this sport better. And I do believe that we need to be more evolutionary in thought when it comes to trying to make mixed martial arts better, so that the rightful guys always win, and so that the sport doesn't have situations like Arnold Allen and Movsar Evloev this weekend. But Kenny, as long as we have the current system, there are going to be close split decisions, and a lot of those are going to happen in title fights. And that's exactly what we had this weekend.
I agree. I definitely think there needs to be this evolution of thought. I think that's a beautiful statement. However, what we may disagree on, because the way I see it is sometimes we try to make things better, quote unquote, by injecting kind of more processes, right? And maybe I'm kind of divulging how I see like governmental things, but a lot of times we're like, hey, if we just bring in more laws, if we just bring in more politicians, and if we just monitor as many things as possible, we can make things better. And a lot of times that complicates the process. But I think what we need more than anything else is more quality people in the proper places. I think that's something that can help the sport itself. Now, that too is open to interpretation. But yeah, it's tough, man. No one's going to be satisfied with a lot of things in general. But I think that a lot of times we repeat these things that just aren't true. Like this whole thing of like, he didn't overwhelmingly beat the champ. And that's why I think Strickland won. Right. It's like, hey, you may think Sean Strickland won and you may have a great argument. Is that the argument? No, it's not. That is just some like repetitive BS that is kind of talked about because you heard commentators say it in boxing 20 years ago, and they've been saying it for the last 20 years. So you think that is now a truth. No, that is just some like loose perception of what we think should happen in the sport. There is nowhere in the rules of judging a round or a series of rounds where that indicates who won or lost. Like that is not in the picture whatsoever.